Hey everyone, I'm Nadia Munla. I'm an embodiment and intimacy coach, and today I want to talk to you about why listening to the voices in your head is actually a sign of good mental health. So here's the thing, right? So often we think of voices in someone's head, like there is so much stigma around what that means and how that means someone has a particular condition or is really mentally unstable, right? There's just like stigma around it not being the best mode of operating in the world. And I'm here to disagree. I actually think it's the best way to operate through life. In fact, it's one of the first tools that I give all of my clients. So this tool is one, and I want to walk you all through it because it's just been so profound. All of my clients come back to me and say this is the #1 tool that they use throughout their lives. People email me years later talking about this tool. Okay, so this tool is essentially one where we get to discern that we are not our thoughts. So this seems, if you think about it, a little ridiculous. You're like, of course, I think my thoughts, therefore my thoughts are me, right? Everything I think is me. I don't know what just happened. Either way. So my thoughts are not me. This is so key because we think all sorts of mean, nasty things about ourselves, about other people, right? Like there's a lot of stuff in there. And if we actually start to think, oh, our thoughts are us, then we're going to go, oh my God, I'm a mean, judgmental, awful human, right? And that doesn't get you anywhere. Definitely does not get you to a place of good mental health, that's for sure. So the key here with this tool is to start to recognize that everything that you think is actually generated. All these different thoughts are generated by different parts of you that have different agendas. And so the way I like to think about it is there's a board meeting in your head, okay, at all times. And you, your essence, your higher self, like your most actualized you, like really you, who you are, your truth, you are the CEO. And then you've got all these other people around the table. So in a board meeting, right, in a normal company, you would have a, head of HR, head of PR, marketing, head of IT, head of, all these different departments. And when there's a new project that's happening, right, if you think about it, when there's a new project, every single head of department is going to have a proposal to the CEO. They're going to have their way and their perspective and their focus based on what it is that their team does as part of the project. And so similarly with us, we are in a way like this really complicated, complex company. And we have these different department heads. So it's going to be a little bit different for each person. But for example, you will have, instead of like the head of HR, you might have an inner critic at the table. And there might actually be a few different inner critics with different personas, but you definitely have at least one inner critic. We all have one inner critic. I know you know what I'm talking about. And then we also might have like, our sensual siren, like the hedonistic part of us that just wants everything to just be pleasure, pleasure, pleasure all the time. And then we'll have our inner little girl who, has different fears and different concerns about like, trepidations, why this project is not a good idea. And then, you may have a like teenage rebel, for example, that comes in. You might have like a warrior queen who's like ready to draw her swords at any moment, and is just like there, like in just like fierce Kali energy, and so on and so forth. You get the gist, right? You have these different energies. They're in all of us because we're all nuanced, complex, beautifully ranged humans. Now, for some of us, we have parts of ourselves we haven't let out to play as much or haven't given voice to because we have fear around them taking over that meeting, right? Does that sound familiar? And so sometimes in a way they are, by the more we suppress them, the more they're going to want to talk. So if you think about it, a really awesome, authentic, well-loved leader who also has boundaries and clarity of vision is going to listen to all of his employees, or her employees. Wow, that was definitely internal misogyny right there. The patriarchy is within me. Save me. Okay, guys, let me focus. The point is, you know, the CEO will listen to all these different department heads, but a good CEO doesn't necessarily try to implement everyone's agenda, because that would be nuts. You wouldn't get anywhere. But they'll listen to their employees, they'll take on the perspective, they'll try it out, and then they might go, thank you so much, Susan, for, you know, whatever. Thanks, Alex, for this perspective, but we're going to go a different direction, right? Like, you've had that happen before, I'm sure, if anyone's ever worked in corporate. And so here's the same thing. Like, it's really important to start to discern and actually personify these different voices and these different parts of you that are gonna have different agendas. And the reason why, you know, lots of times when I tell people at the beginning, like, oh, like, so we're gonna work on like talking to the different voices in your head, people might start to question why they gave me money initially, but then they realize it's the best tool they've ever used. And the truth is, it seems a little on the outside, but it's actually so phenomenal, because what it starts to do is then when you have a thought, you can slow down enough and go, wait a second, hold on. Who is actually saying this thought? My inner little girl, my inner critic, my sensual siren, my teenage rebel, right? And then you can start to understand, well, okay, that means that thought isn't necessarily my truth. And so you can then examine that thought. You can then sit down and speak to that teenage rebel and go, you know, what is it that you really are needing? What are you protecting me from? And finding the way in which every single one of our employees, assuming they're really good employees, are doing their best to actually move forward a project. So all these parts of ourselves, even when they seem critical and nasty or like inconvenient or like just being a pain in the ass, they're always coming from a place of there's something positive that they're trying to move forward. They just might not have the right tactic and strategy for it, right? So for example, your inner critic, maybe saying some really freaking awful stuff, but it's coming from a place of protecting you, because they have a worldview that if you do it this way, the world will, you know, just climb all over you, or you know, basically just like you'll crumble underneath the weight of the world, or whatever their belief system might be. But the key here is really to start to extract the thought from your essence, because your essence is the CEO. And if you listen to every single thing, you're going to be a horrible manager and a horrible CEO. But if you listen and don't follow through, but really understand everyone's perspective, that's when there's more cohesiveness in the company. So that's, I think, all I want to say about that tool. It's quite a complex one, so I find it's always best to work with a coach or a therapist on implementing it over time. But for now, I invite you to just slow down the next time there is a thought that creeps up and it doesn't really feel right, like it's not really yours. Just start to notice, okay, who might this be in my mind? What voice? And can you give them, can you personify them, give them a name, give them even an outfit. I like to give them outfits and ages and nicknames and all the things, because the more they are outside of you, the more you start to understand, oh, that's not a thought that I had. That's a thought that my inner critic had. That's a thought that my inner little girl had. And then you can have a dialogue with them that way, instead of confuse yourself and be like, I just thought I was awesome and I suck at the same time. How is that possible, right? I'm sure we've all had that experience. That's because it's different parts of you struggling, having a fight, taking the microphone in the board meeting. So the key in all of this is you as the CEO get to hold the mic in the meeting. Now, occasionally you might pass it to someone, but if you're walking around in the world and not questioning what voice is saying what, then what's happening is they are controlling the meeting. You're going to have the head of HR, head of IT controlling the meeting, and that's not what you want. You want to be in control of your own life, of your own thoughts, of the own meeting going on in your head. All right, let me know how it goes.